Hello and welcome to the Weekend Spectator. My name is Grace Reilly and I'm joined by the one and only great Paul Kengor. It's so great to be with you. We just had a week off with the holidays, but we're happy to be back this week. And we're going to be talking about DEI, corporate America, and all that's going on there. Many have said that it's kind of taken a toll with the results of the election, but we'll see if that continues to happen. But a lot to talk about today. Paul, it's so great to be with you.
Great and gracious Grace. Good to be with you again.
So good to be with you. So, we're going to be talking mostly about a piece that was written for the American Spectator by Richard Coker, who's a professor at Grove City College. And you can see the piece up on the screen right now. It was a great one, kind of going over the ways that DEI has hurt corporate America. And I'll say that I remember hearing him speak about this at Grove City College. The Institute for Faith and Freedom held a lecture series luncheon in Pittsburgh where he spoke on this topic. So, seeing the article was pretty cool to just see how he's kind of finished out these thoughts and applied them to where we are now. But what were your initial thoughts and takeaways from it?
Yeah, Professor Coker, so he's taught business at Grove City College for quite a while, and he's really an expert on corporate wokeism. I mean, so he's done a number of different things, expert on different aspects of corporate life and corporate giving and donation. And what do they call it when companies developed a social conscience? I think I don't.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're
Yeah,
talking.
it's a different phrase. It's a specific phrase that has to do with giving. And he's one of those people who talked about Milton Friedman's theories on this and so forth. Milton Friedman used to argue that, well, the business of the company is making a profit. And I know that a lot of people on the left are like, oh, that's just ruthless, whatever. But his point was, in doing that, the company is providing a social good. It's giving jobs to people. And of course, the company charges prices based on what the market demands. As Ludwig von Mises said, right, it's the consumer that's the sovereign dictator in the marketplace, right? Companies charge what they think you, customers, are going to pay for it. And that affects how many employees they have, what they pay their employees. So, the business of the corporation is really to do that. But in more recent years, in more recent decades, and Professor Coker has pointed this out, companies have done more in terms of social giving, donations, social causes. And the problem with this, Grace, like a lot of that is good, right? And it sounds good. And it's like, well, your company gives money to the Salvation Army or the United Way or this particular group. But then the problem with that sometimes is you never know where this is going to go. And you could end up with, and they do end up, these major companies, they end up hiring the best and the brightest out of the business schools, out of the Northeast colleges, out of the Ivy League. And guess what? Those people tend to be liberal. So here you end up with, and Rich Coker leads his article with this. It's March 2023, March Madness, college basketball, and Bud Light decides that the best way to appeal to its blue collar customer base, picture like NASCAR guys, is to use social media influencer. I hate that word, by the way, influencer. Dylan Mulvaney, who's like, a transgender activist and everything. And when you really go back and look at that decision, I think a lot of it boiled down to there was this kind of young ditzy girl that they got for, I don't know, Wharton Business School or somewhere is like, oh, Dylan's wonderful, and a really popular influencer. Oh, I just think that our customer base will love Dylan, right? No, that's these are guys that go back in their backyards and shoot empty Bud Light beer cans with their guns. I'm from a family like that. My family in Western Pennsylvania is like that. I'm not stereotyping the other side. This describes my people, right? My people from Butler, PA. So they used Dylan Mulvaney, and the Bud Light customers just went into full scale revolt.
Oh,
I
I
can tell
still
you,
won't buy it and I never will again. And that's, you know what? That's exactly what happened. And this is basic marketing stuff with understanding your audience. But Bud Light showed that
right?
they didn't, not only that they didn't understand their audience, but I think they proved that it may not even have been that. They just didn't care because even after
Yeah,
this happened, they doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down, where they did multiple things with pride events and this and that,
yeah.
double down on their position, even though the company completely tanked. They lost huge customer bases, everything else. Just Anheuser-Busch. And, that's still going on where I know plenty of people transitioned to different brands and they won't go back ever again because of it. And especially because Bud Light basically said when the customers, used the capitalism to their advantage and said, okay, well, we're not going to support you with our money then. Instead of kind of falling to that, Bud Light basically just threw it in their faces again and said, well, we don't want you anyway.
Well,
And
a lot of
with it.
Yeah, a lot of them have contempt for their customers. They see them as hicks and hayseeds and Neanderthals and MAGA supporters, right? And in a lot of cases, and I think this is actually, unfortunately, true, Grace. A lot of these boards will say, they're complaining and whining, but they'll be back. They might be angry for a few weeks, but they'll be back. And they often are. The customer often is. But in this case, it was a sustained revolt. You'd never seen anything quite like it. And I could tell you, going to the beer distributor here in Grove City on Main Street, and not that you frequented the beer distributor when you were a student here, Grace, but you
Not
probably drove
allowed.
by
No.
it, right? But you drove by it every time you went to County Market down that way. And I remember stopping at this place, and I mean, they're practically giving away Bud Light. They lower the price so much, and a lot of distributors had to end up throwing it away because the beer has a shelf life.
Yeah.
In this case, it really blew up on Bud Light, and that seemed to be a signal to a lot of the rest of the corporate world to back off a little bit on the wokeism.
Yeah, no, it definitely has been a signal, but some are, and we have a few examples to go over that kind of prove that point, but some are still learning Disney's
Yeah,
way
they
back.
sure are. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not as optimistic, by the way. I know you're going to go through a few examples, but I'll just head that off by saying Rich Coker in his piece, and a lot of people have been saying since the election of Trump, and he gives several examples, right, about companies like Walmart and others are now backing away from the DEI stuff. I'm happy to see that. And by the way, shame on these people for being such cowards to begin with. And so if they're going to change now, because I don't know, they're reading the tea leaves from the election or whatever, seeing a cultural shift, great. I'm glad they're changing, but you guys are still cowards.
mhm.
But I'm not as optimistic because the people who staff these corporations, like I said, are the people who are coming, not from the stands at NASCAR, right? They're coming from from the campuses, from the ivory tower campuses, from the business schools. So I'm not as optimistic.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
unless and until that ever gets fixed, nothing's going to change with the culture. I mean,
right.
the way that the universities are and the schools all the way down to kindergarten is a huge problem that people don't pay enough attention to. And that's I mean the key to a lot of it. And you're so right that people are coming through the universities. So that's why you're probably right. It was some young person who decided that. And that's how it's been with a lot of these companies. And yeah, one of the ones who's still learning is Disney. If you've seen the new Snow
Yeah.
White movie that's going to be coming out, is already looking very bleak for them. It's a complete disaster because the star has decided to make wokeness and her extreme left leaning politics kind of the center of this marketing campaign, which obviously has made people mad.
37
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. So we didn't do that this time. I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years. The cartoon was made 85 years ago, and therefore it's extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power.
And she's another one who's continued to be, I'll say, a liability for them because she's continued to make the situation worse. But I'm sure that we'll see when it comes out in a few months, we'll see the numbers reflect this because they already are. Even just, it's looking really bad for how it's going to do.
Yeah, my friend Michael Medved, and I do a show often. I'll be doing it again tomorrow. I do it about once or twice a month for years now. And he wrote a book, man, almost 30 years ago called Hollywood versus America. And his whole point was, everybody would says, all they really care about is making money. He said, if they cared about making money, they would make more family-friendly movies.
Yeah.
They would make movies like Gladiator. By the way, Gladiator 2 is out right now. They would make more movies like Deadpool and Wolverine, right? Which are movies that that the woke liberal would say, oh, that's toxic masculinity, right? People want to see that stuff. They want to see family friendly movies. We had a piece up this week. I should have cued you on this, but Bruce Bauer, who's a cultural critic for us, wrote a fascinating piece, Grace, looking at Law and Order SVU, I think is the name of it. I've never seen it. And he started digging into it and watching some of their episodes. And look at the examples that he highlights in the article about where the bad guy it comes from a homeschool Christian family. And in another case, you have a homeschool Christian family which adopts a black kid and indoctrinate him and do all this bad, evil stuff with him. The other kid from the homeschool Christian family is like Nazi, pro-Nazi, all this other stuff. And it makes you so angry because, as you and I know, I mean, the people who adopt children are actually conservative Christians.
Yeah.
And they're not liberals in Manhattan and out in California. I mean, these people wonder who's doing the adopting. It's people like us. By the way, I have 2 adopted kids. My youngest kid is black, adopted. So we're the ones that are adopting. And one is tempted to say, don't they realize that? Haven't they looked around and noticed that their liberal friends don't adopt anybody? Maybe they've noticed that, but they wouldn't know that conservative Christians adopt kids because they don't know any.
Well,
They
also, I mean,
live in their bubbles.
talk about the family and marriage at all. I mean, who's advocating that you don't get married or that you stay single or be effeminate,
Right.
or if you're a woman,
And that you have abortions.
queer, and that, yes, who's advocating that? It's the left. So they're not even getting together to have their own families, let alone adopt. And obviously that's
Yeah.
not everyone, but like,
And then
we're looking next to each other broadly at the different what people are doing. I mean,
and then in their fictionalized portrayals in Hollywood, they take those of us who are choosing life and also choosing to adopt. By the way, the pro-abortion people, the pro-choice people say all the time, well, if you guys are really pro-life, you'd be adopting kids. Well, we do. We actually
you're the
do.
example of this.
Yeah. And then we do, and then you go to your cameras in Hollywood and New York and conjure up these fake scenarios as if the kids that we're raising are the villains, right? So it's just it's horrible what they do.
Yeah. No, it really is. And that's just a great point. And even going back to the DEI thing, so even beyond Disney, and all that piece will have been up on the screen too, but beyond Disney, I mean, there are plenty of reports of a lot of different companies that all of a sudden have started dismantling their DEI practices, one of which being Southwest Airlines. Another
They're
was,
horrible. Yeah, on this
yeah,
stuff.
have been horrible. University of Michigan. There are different universities who are now doing this. So there's a lot. There's a list, and you'll see some on your screen now. There's a bunch of different people who, or companies, I should say, that are starting to dismantle these. Partly, you could say a cultural shift, but also, I mean, the problem is the policies create problems for them, their companies, things that don't work. And they're finally realizing that and having to own up to it. And another highlight from this past week.
And their employees hate it, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I have I can't be careful how I say this, but a family member who works for one of those airlines. And man, she hates it. She hates what they do for Pride Month and everything. Wow.
Well, and the airlines are some of the worst offenders in the sense that most people would agree that you do not want DEI involved in the hiring process of pilots, of airline mechanics. That is not the time. I mean, we're talking, we need merit, we need people who are accomplished, who can get the job done, and that's about it. I mean, there should not be these other things even considered. But yeah,
hire as many DEI people as you want at Dairy Queen and at the supermarket, but I don't want them flying my airplanes.
exactly.
All right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Draw a line there. Is the head of one of those, it's either United or American Airlines. He's the one who's super woke, the guy who's
I don't
on
know.
video dressing up transgender. Look that up, and maybe you could post a picture of him when you find it. He's an unbelievable, just jaw drop. You'll just be like, situation. I mean, crazy how liberal this guy is. And he came out of, I think, the Air Force Academy or something. Crazy.
That is crazy. And yeah, then to close us out, we'll just do a highlight from this week that isn't DEI, but it just follows in the theme of kind of what we were talking about in the beginning from Richard Coker's piece, with part of it being, understanding the way the market works in your audience and how to run a business. A woman from Idaho, a salon owner or a salon, I don't know, I think she is the owner of the beauty salon, went viral because she went on a rant talking about how Trump supporters are racist and the worst. And then now she posted another video talking about how her customers have dropped like flies.
If you support a racist, homophobic, misogynist rapist, and you're okay with those things because you supported them, that you are in fact those things. And she was so offended by that she said that she did not feel comfortable coming to my salon anymore. Dropping like flies. I lost one of my clients today who clearly was a Trump supporter.
She's losing all these customers and all this
How
stuff.
dare they?
Exactly. So that's kind of, I think, a good way to kind of close this out of this is what happens, and it's what happens to these big companies. It's what happens if you decide to, make statements like that, demonizing half of your customers. This is a risk you're taking.
And conversely, so many of these activists will shake down these companies. In fact, I didn't know until I saw it on Rich Coker's piece that he said Walmart had an agreement where they were providing data to the Human Rights Campaign. Wow, really? Are you serious? I mean, that's crazy. Could you imagine trying to answer every month to, I don't know what they were providing them with, maybe data on who they're hiring, what they're doing, and what they're posting, which months and weeks and days they're celebrating to make the people of the Human Rights Campaign happy. I mean, that's just, that's utter madness. And I'm hoping too,
That's
maybe this is
climate stuff too.
Yeah, the climate stuff as well. And I did start seeing a change this past summer. Very few NFL teams marked Pride Month. Not very few. Many, a lot less, including my Pittsburgh Steelers, among others. By the way, you ask, what's the NFL doing celebrating Pride Month anyway? That's June. The season doesn't even start till September, late August. But they had to stick their nose in it. And remember 2 years ago, the Los Angeles Dodgers celebrating, honoring with an award, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence on Pride Night in Major League Baseball. The only team that year that didn't celebrate Pride Month was the Texas Rangers, which, by the way, ended up winning the World Series, and the Dodgers ended up losing. But I love to see this stop with the NFL. The NFL is Gay campaign. Look that up. NFL is Gay campaign. They've had an ad campaign for that in a while. Even the NHL in hockey celebrating this stuff. So I hope some of this will start to end. But I'm not very optimistic.
It's like it has. I think it at least temporarily is moving that way.
Right.
But you are
for
so
now.
right though that is not. It's not moving that way for the right reasons, and thus it will not stay that way because it's
That's
not
right.
changing. DEI isn't slowing right now because people have realized it's a problem. It's because these businesses are kind of trying to stay in line and survive a little bit, but it doesn't. Yeah, of course. So it's not going to last, and of course we should be watchful always of it, but I think it's been pretty fun to watch some of them learn their lessons just business wise as all of this is.
It has indeed. It's been fun to watch.
Oh yeah, it has. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us for this episode of the Weekend Spectator. We hope that you'll share this with your friends. Go to spectator.org to read the articles that we mentioned in this video and more, and that you'll come back and join us next week.
Grazie, Grace. We will see you all next week.
See you next week.